He slapped her so hard, her vision blurred. Her cheek flamed with pain and the taste of blood hit her tongue like rust. She stumbled backward. The floorboards groaned beneath her bare feet. She didn't scream. Not anymore. There was no point. Silas Creed watched her with a satisfied smirk. He stood tall, belly full of whiskey, eyes red with the madness of ownership. "You'll learn," he hissed, "one way or another." Clara Ray was 22, too young to have this much fear carved into her bones, too old to believe in rescue. She clutched the torn edge of her cotton dress. Her shoulder throbbed where he had shoved her into the wall. A bruise was already rising. It matched the ones on her thighs, on her ribs, on her soul. They called it marriage, but there were no vows, no ring, just a contract signed with a bottle and a lie. He had bought her with money and menace, and in this god-forsaken corner of Arizona, no one would ask why. The room stank of sweat and power, of a man drunk on his own control. Clara stood still, one hand trembling by her side, the other clenched so tight her nails dug into her palm. She looked at him, and something flickered behind her swollen eye. Not surrender, strategy. She swallowed, stepped forward slowly. Bielavus narrowed his gaze. "Changed your mind, have you?" he muttered. Clara nodded. Then she whispered, "Right here? Right now?" she asked, her voice barely a breath, but her words landed like thunder. Silas laughed, loud and full of victory. He poured another drink, dropped into the wooden chair like a king on his throne, took a long pull from the bottle, behind her back. Clara's fingers brushed the oil lamp on the shelf. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Her heart beat louder than his boots ever were. He wouldn't hear her leave. He wouldn't feel the absence until morning. Silas lifted his glass toward her. "You made the right choice, girl," he slurred. Clara smiled. It was the first smile he'd seen from her. He didn't know it was the last. She turned, walked to the door. Slow, calm, precise. Every step away from him was a step toward freedom. Every bruise became lighter with each breath of night air. She didn't cry, didn't look back, not once. The stars above Tombstone flickered like 1,000 witnesses. She ran through the scrub and dust. No shoes, no plan, only purpose. Behind her, silence. In front of her, the unknown. She ran toward it, because anything was better than staying. If death was waiting, so be it. But if life was out there, if there was even a single soul with kindness left, then that was where she would go. She clutched her ribs, her feet cut on rocks and thorns, but she kept going. The night was dry and cruel. But she had survived worse. She kept moving, until her legs gave out near a rise of dirt and stone. She collapsed at the edge of Boot Hill Cemetery, breath ragged, heart pounding, eyes wide and lost. Then, footsteps. Slow, heavy, steady. A shadow fell across her body. She blinked up, expecting another monster, but instead, she saw a man, older, worn, holding flowers and staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. He dropped the flowers. Clara tried to speak. No sound came. The man knelt beside her. His voice shook like the desert wind. "You all right, darling?" She didn't answer. Didn't need to. He saw everything written on her skin. In her silence, he reached for her, hands trembling, and that was how Elias Boone found her. Not as a savior, but as a man still hoping. He hadn't run out of reasons to believe in redemption. The morning light crept over Tombstone, soft and gold like it was afraid to touch her. Clara woke up with dust in her mouth and a weight on her chest that wasn't just pain. It was the memory of everything she had run from. She blinked and saw boots beside her face, old, worn, scuffed from years of work. Then she heard a man's voice, low, slow, rough like gravel. "You still with me, darling?" he asked. She tried to speak, but her throat burned. Only a nod came out. Elias Boone took off his hat and rubbed the back of his neck. He hadn't seen anyone out here in days, and now this. A young woman lying in front of a grave like she had fallen out of heaven and straight into hell. He glanced at the headstone beside her. It was his wife's name. For a second, he thought maybe he had gone crazy. "Easy now," he whispered. "I got you." He lifted her into his arms. She was light. Too light. Her skin was warm from fever. Her hair smelled like smoke and fear. He carried her across the dry field toward his horse. Every step made his shoulder ache, but he didn't stop. Not once. At the small ranch on the edge of the valley, he laid her on the old bed near the window. His ranch sat low in the valley west of Tombstone, where the wind always smelled of dust and old ghosts, the same one his wife had died in. He poured a bit of water into her mouth. She flinched, then drank. For the first time in days, she didn't feel hunted. Hours passed. The wind outside whistled through the fence like an old tune. Elias sat by the window, hat in hand, staring at her. She opened her eyes again, soft, uncertain. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Home," he said quietly. "Not mine exactly, but safe." Something broke inside her. Not pain this time, relief. He tried to smile. "You got folks somewhere, someone who's going to come looking." She shook her head. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. Not anymore. Elias nodded slowly. He didn't push, didn't ask for her story. He'd seen too many broken things to demand the details. Instead, he said, "Rest up. Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next." She closed her eyes, but her hand found his. Her fingers trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias looked at her for a long time. He didn't say a word. But deep down, something he thought was long dead began to stir again. A quiet feeling, something close to hope. He turned to look out the window. The sky was turning red with sunset. And far off, beyond the hills, a cloud of dust was rising. Riders, coming fast. The riders came just before dark. Dust rolled behind them like smoke from a fire that never went out. Elias saw it first. He stepped out onto the porch, and hand resting near the old Colt that hung by the door. The same gun he swore he'd never touch again. Inside, Claire sat up on the bed, her face pale, her eyes wide. She knew that dust. She had seen it before. "It's him," she whispered. Her voice barely made a sound. Elias didn't ask who. He didn't need to. He could see the truth written all over her. He nodded once. "Stay inside. Lock the door behind me." Clara wanted to protest, but something in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't anger. It was resolve. The kind that comes from a man who's already buried too much. He stepped into the yard, boots crunching against the dry dirt. The riders slowed. 2 men, the one in front tall and heavy, with a cruel grin that made the air colder. "Boone," the man called. "You got something of mine." Elias didn't move. "Don't think so," he said. "Only thing here's a tired horse and a woman who don't belong to nobody." The man's grin faded. His hand dropped toward his gun. Elias watched him close, calm as a man counting seconds before a storm. Inside, Claire stood at the window, watching through a crack in the curtain. Her hands shook, not from fear this time, but from the unbearable thought that someone might die for her. The sun slipped behind the ridge. The light turned red, painting the dirt like blood before it spilled. Then it happened. A single shout, a flash, 2 gunshots echoed through the valley. Claire screamed his name, but her voice vanished into the wind. When she ran outside, the air was thick with dust and gunpowder. Elias was on one knee, holding his shoulder. The other man lay still. The second rider was already fleeing toward the hills. Elias looked up at her, wincing but still steady. "It's done," he said. "Go inside before more come." She knelt beside him. Tears streaked through the dirt on her face. "You shouldn't have done this for me," he smiled weakly. "Maybe not, but I reckon I was due to do one good thing before I meet my maker." Clara pressed a rag to his wound. "Then you better not meet him just yet." Elias chuckled softly. "I'll try not to." "Darling." The night fell slow and heavy. In the distance, coyotes howled like they were singing for the dead. But inside that small house, 2 souls breathed the same air, and the world felt almost peaceful. If you're still here listening, take a slow sip of your tea. Tell me what time it is where you are and where you're hearing this story from. And if this tale of the Wild West speaks to you, hit that subscribe button, partner. There's more dust, danger, and a bit of love waiting in the next one. The day came quiet, but the land felt different. Even the wind had stopped like it was waiting for something. Elias woke before sunrise. He stood outside the cabin, watching the horizon turn from blue to gold. He had been here before. Too many times, different men, Same kind of trouble. Claire stepped outside, her hair loose, her hands still stained with his blood from the night before. "You think they'll come back?" she asked. He nodded. "They always do." By noon, the heat was heavy. Flies buzzed around the fence. The silence was the kind that made your heart race. Then they came. 3 riders, dust trailing behind like ghosts chasing them. Elias watched from the barn. He had moved the horses, set a few ropes across the path, and loaded what bullets he had left. He was tired, but his mind was sharp. The first rider came fast, not seeing the loose plank Elias had set. His horse stumbled. The man went flying, hitting the dirt hard, didn't move again. The second slowed, shouting a warning. Clara, inside, gripped the edge of the window frame, her breath quick and shallow. Then Silas rode into view, his face bruised, hat pulled low, anger twisting his mouth. He reined in his horse, scanning the yard. "Boone," he called, "come out. Let's finish what you started." Elias stepped into the sunlight, rifle in hand. He looked older than the last time Silas saw him, but calmer too. Didn't start nothing. Creed. "Just finished what you brought," Silas sneered. "You think this ends with me?" Elias didn't answer. The next second, everything exploded. The second rider fired first. Elias ducked behind a post, shot back. He had done this before, long ago, when he was a younger man with steadier hands. The bullet hit the man's arm, sent him screaming and running for the hills. Silas charged forward, shouting. His horse crashed through the dust, gun raised high. Elias waited. 1 breath. 2. Then he fired. A clean hit. Silas fell hard, rolling in the dirt, his gun skidding away. Elias walked over slowly, rifle still aimed. Silas tried to speak, blood on his lips. "You think you're a hero?" "Boone." Elias looked down at him, eye steady. "No, just a man who finally stopped running." He pulled the trigger one last time. The echo carried across the valley until even the wind fell quiet. Claire came running. She stopped beside him, shaking, tears in her eyes. "It's done," she whispered. Elias looked toward the ridge where the last rider had vanished. Almost far away, thunder rumbled. Not from the sky, from hooves. And this time, they weren't coming for blood. They were bringing something else. The dust settled that evening. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and something new. Peace. Elias stood by the fence, staring at the hills where the riders had vanished. His arm ached, but his heart felt light for the first time in years. Clara came to stand beside him, her face soft in the orange light. "They're gone," she said. He nodded. For now. For a while. Neither spoke. The world felt still. Even the wind seemed tired of fighting. That night, Clara made soup with what little they had. She moved slow, careful not to wake the pain in her ribs. Elias sat near the fire, watching the flames dance across her face. "You ever think God gives second chances?" she asked. He looked down at the rifle beside him. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Or maybe he just keeps waiting till we stop running." Claire smiled a little. Her hand shook as she set the bowl in front of him. "You stopped running today." "Yeah," he said, "and I reckon you did too." They ate in silence for a while. Outside, the night stretched wide and kind. Days turned to weeks. Elias healed slow, and Clara helped around the ranch. She fed the horses, fixed fences, laughed a little more each morning. The sound of her laughter filled the house like sunlight through an old window. Sometimes they talked about leaving Tombstone. Other times, they just sat on the porch, watching the horizon. Neither needed much, just peace. One morning, Claire brought 2 cups of coffee and sat beside him. The sun rose soft and golden. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. Elias smiled. "I think about it every day. I just quit trying to chase it." She nodded, taking a slow sip. "Maybe life ain't about what we run from. Maybe it's about what we decide to stay for." He looked at her. The lines on his face softened. "Then I'll stay right here." She laughed quietly. "Right here. Right now." He smiled back. Every time. Clara. Every single time. The wind carried their laughter over the valley. The scars would never fade completely, but that was all right. Some scars were proof of survival, not pain. Maybe that's the lesson, hiding out here in the dust and silence, that sometimes life breaks you just enough so you can rebuild stronger. that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just sits beside you and stays. And maybe the real question is this: when the storm passes and the noise dies down, who will you choose to stay for what's worth your peace? If this story touched something in you, give it a like. It helps more folks find their way to this little corner of the Wild West. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, partner. We've got more stories waiting about love, loss, and the kind of courage that keeps you breathing when the world says stop. Now take a breath, sip your tea, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Because out here under the same sky, it's never too late to start again.